Continuing where I left off, Chapter 3. In December 1805, old Prince Nikolai Androvich Balkalsky received a letter from Prince Vasily announcing his arrival with his son. I am going on tour inspection, and of course, an additional 100 versts to come and see you, my honored benefactor, is a mere detour, wrote Prince Vasily. My son Anatole is accompanying me on his way to the army, and I hope you will permit him personally to express the deep respect that, emulating his father, he feels for you. Well, there's no need to bring Marya out. Suitors are coming of their own accord, the little princess imprudently remarked on hearing the news. Prince Nikolai Androvich frowned and said nothing. 2 weeks after the letter, Prince Vasily's servants arrived one evening in advance of him, and the following day he appeared with his son. Old Balkalsky had always had a poor opinion of Prince Vasily's character, and more so recently, since in the new reigns of Paul and Alexander, Prince Vasily had attained high rank and honors, and now, from the hints given in the letter and by the little princess, he understood the purpose of the visit, and his low opinion changed to a feeling of hostile contempt. He snorted every time he mentioned it. On the day of Prince Vasily's arrival, Prince Nikolai Androvich was particularly ill-humored and irascible. Whether he was ill-humored because Prince Vasily was coming, or whether being in a particularly irascible mood made him more annoyed by the visit. He was in a bad temper, and in the morning Tikhon had already dissuaded the architect from going to the prince with his report. You hear now he's walking, said Tikhon, drawing the architect's attention to the sound of Prince's footsteps. Coming down on his heels, we know what that means. However, at 9 o'clock, the old prince went out for his walk as usual, wearing his fur-lined velvet coat with a sable collar and cap. Snow had fallen the day before, and the path along which Prince Nikolai Androvich walked to the greenhouses had been swept. The broom traces were still visible in the snow, and a shovel had been left sticking in one of the powdery snowbanks that bordered both sides of the path. Silent and scowling, the prince walked through the greenhouses, the serfs' quarters, and the outbuildings. Can a sledge get through? He asked his steward, a venerable man resembling his master in appearance and manner, who was accompanying him back to the house. The snow is deep, your excellency. I gave orders for the avenue to be cleared too. The prince nodded and went toward the porch. The Lord be thanked, thought the steward. The storm clouds have blown over. It would have been hard to get through, your excellency, added the steward. I heard, your excellency, that a minister is coming to visit your excellency. The prince turned around to his steward and glowered at him. What? A minister? What minister? Who gave those orders? He snapped in his hard, shrill voice. For the princess, my daughter, you do not clear the road, but for a minister you do? For me, there are no ministers. Your excellency, I thought, you thought, shouted the prince, speaking with increasing haste and incoherency. You thought, ruffians, scoundrels, I'll teach you to think. He raised his stick, threatening Petrovich with it, and would have struck him had not the steward instinctively avoided the blow. You thought, scoundrel, the prince quickly shouted, and although Petrovich, appalled by his own temerity in averting the blow, went up to the prince with his bald head, humbly bowed, or perhaps for that very reason, the prince, while continuing to shout, Scoundrel! Shoveled the snow back on the road. Jew did not raise his stick again, but rushed into the house. Before dinner, Princess Marya and Mademoiselle Borynia, aware that the prince was in bad humor, stood waiting for him. Mademoiselle Borynia, with a blithe expression that seemed to say, I know nothing about it. I am just the same as usual. And Princess Marya, pale, frightened, and with downcast eyes. What made it even harder for Princess Marya was that she knew she ought to behave like Mademoiselle Borynia on such occasions, but this she could not do. If I appear not to notice, he will think I do not sympathize with him, she thought. And if I act as if myself I am out of spirits, he will say, as he had often happened, that I am sulking. The prince glanced at his daughter's apprehensive face and snorted. Fool, he muttered, and the other one's not here. They've been telling her tales, he thought, noticing that the little princess was not in the dining room. And where is the princess, he asked in hiding. She's not feeling very well, replied Mademoiselle Borin, smiling brightly. She's not coming down. It's quite natural in her condition. Humph. Ha, the prince sputtered, sitting down at the table. It seemed to him that his plate was not clean. He pointed to a spot on it and flung it away. Tikhon caught it and handed it to the butler. The little princess was not unwell, but she had such an invincible fear of the prince that on hearing he was in bad humor she decided not to appear. I'm afraid for my baby, she said to Mademoiselle Borin. Heaven knows what a fright might do. In general, at Bald Hills, the little princess lived in constant fear, and with a feeling of apathy to the old prince that she herself was not aware of, her fear being so overpowering she could feel nothing else. The prince reciprocated this antipathy, but on his side it was submerged in contempt. As she accustomed herself to life at Bald Hills, the little princess became particularly fond of Mademoiselle Borin, spent her days with her, asked her to sleep in her room at night, and often talked to her about her father-in-law and criticized him. So we are to have visitors, mon prince, said Mademoiselle Borin, unfolding her dinner napkin with her rosy fingers. His Excellency, Prince Kuragin, and his son, I believe, she added in a tone of inquiry. Humph! That Excellency is a puppy. I got him his first appointment in the service, said the prince scathingly. And why is his son coming? I don't understand. Prince Levesta Korvana and Princess Marya may know. I don't know what's he bringing his son here for. I don't want him. And he looked at his blushing daughter. Not feeling well, eh? Scared of the minister, as that blockhead Petrovich called him this morning. No, mon Pierre. Unfortunate as her choice of subject had been, Mademoiselle Borin did not stop talking, but prattled on about the greenhouses, the beauty of a flower that just had opened, and by the time he had finished his soup, the prince was somewhat mollified. After dinner, he went to see his daughter-in-law. The little princess was sitting at a small table, chattering with her maid Masha. She turned pale on seeing her father-in-law. The little princess was greatly changed. She now looked ugly rather than pretty. Her cheeks were hollow, her lips drawn up, her eyes sunken. Yes, it's a sort of heaviness, she said in answer to the prince's question as to how she felt. Is there anything you want? None, Messieurs, none, Pierre. Very well, then, very well. He left her and went to the anteroom, where Alpatch stood with bowed head. Has the snow been shoveled back onto the road? Yes, Your Excellency. Forgive me, for God's sake, it was only my stupidity. The prince cut him short with his unnatural laugh. All right. He held out his hand for Alpatch to kiss him and went into the study. That evening, Prince Vasily arrived. He was met in the avenue by coachmen and footmen, who, with much shouting, dragged the sledges up to one wing of the house over a road that had purposely been covered with snow. Prince Vasily and Anatole were conducted to separate apartments. After taking off his tunic, Anatole sat with arms akimbo before a table on one corner of which he fixed his large, handsome eyes, smiling absent-mindedly. He regarded his entire life as one continual round of amusement, which someone or other was for some reason obliged to provide for him, and now he looked on the visit to a churlish old man and a rich, ugly heiress in the same way. All this, he conjectured, might turn out very well and even be amusing, and why not marry her if she has so much money? That never does any harm. He shaved and scented himself with the care and elegance that had become habitual to him, and his handsome head held high, walked into his father's room with his characteristic air of conquering good humor. Two valets were busily engaged in dressing Prince Vasily, who was looking around in lively interest. He gave his son a cheerful nod as he entered, as if to say, "Good, that's just how I wanted you to look." Joking apart, father, is she very hideous? Anatole asked his father, as if continuing a subject that had been discussed more than once during the journey. Enough now. What nonsense. The important thing is, try to be respectful and circumspect with the old prince. If he starts to row, I'm leaving, said Anatole. I can't stand these old men. Remember, for you everything depends on this. Meanwhile, in the main servants' room, not only was the arrival of the minister and his son already known, but the appearance of both had been described in detail. Prince Marya was sitting alone in her room, vainly trying to subdue her agitation. Why did they write? Why did Lisa tell me about it? It can never be, she said to herself, looking into the glass. How shall I go into the drawing room, even if I were to like him? I could never be myself with him now. The mere thought of father's eyes filled her with terror. The little princess and Mademoiselle Bourienne had always received from Masha, the maid, all the necessary information about how handsome the minister's son was, with his red cheeks and black eyebrows, and how the papa could hardly drag his feet up the stairs, while the son had flown up like an eagle 3 steps at a time. After receiving this report, the little princess and Mademoiselle Bourienne, the sound of whose vivacious chattering had reached her from the corridor, went to Princess Marya's room. They come, Marie. Did you know? Asked the little princess, waddling in and sinking heavily into an easy chair. She was no longer wearing the loose gown she generally wore in the morning, but had put on one of her best dresses. Her hair was carefully done and her face was animated, which, however, did not disguise her drawn and pallid features. Dressed as she used to be in the Petersburg society, it was still more noticeable how homely she had become. Mademoiselle Bourienne had added some unobtrusive touch to her own attire, which made her fresh, pretty face yet more attractive. Eh bien, are you going to remain as you are, chère princesse? She began. They'll be coming to tell us that the gentlemen are in the drawing room. We shall have to go down soon, and you haven't done the least thing about dressing. The little princess got up, rang for her maid, and briskly and gaily set about devising and executing a plan of how Princess Marya should be dressed. Princess Marya's self-esteem was wounded by the fact that the arrival of her suitor agitated her, and still more so by both her companions, assuming that it could not be otherwise. To tell them how ashamed she was of herself and of them would be to betray her perturbation, and to refuse their suggestions concerning her dress would only lead to prolonged banter and insistence. She flushed, her beautiful eyes grew dim, red blotches came out of her face, and it took on the unattractive, martyred expression it so often wore, as she submitted to the authority of Mademoiselle Bourienne and Lisa. Both women were absolutely sincere in trying to make her look pretty. She was so plain that the thought of rivalry with her never entered their heads. Consequently, they set about dressing in good faith, and the naive and firm conviction women have that clothes can make a face pretty. No, decidedly, mon beau ami, this dress is all wrong, said Lisa, standing off and looking at Prince Marya from the side. You have a maroon dress. Have it fetched? Really? Why, you know, it may very well be that your fate is about to be decided. But this one is too light. It's not pretty. No, not at all. It was not the dress, but Princess Marya's face and whole figure that was not pretty. But Mademoiselle Bourienne and the little princess did not sense this. They still thought that if a blue ribbon were put in her hair, the hair combed up, a blue scarf arranged lower on a brown dress, or something of the sort, that all would be well. They seemed oblivious to the fact that a timorous face and figure cannot be altered, that however they might modify the setting and the adornment of that face, it would still remain piteous and plain. After 2 or 3 changes to Princess Marya's meekly submitted, after her hair had been arranged high on her head, a style that completely altered and ruined her looks, and she had put on the maroon dress and the pale blue scarf, the little princess walked twice around her, adjusting a fold of the dress, giving a tug to the scarf with her little hand, and scrutinizing her with her head bent first on one side, then on the other. No, it won't do, she said with certainty, throwing up her hands. No, Maria, this sentiment, that does not suit you. I like you better in your little everyday gray dress. Now, please, do it for my sake, Katya, she said to the maid. Bring the princess her gray dress. You'll see, Mademoiselle Bourienne what I shall do with it," she said with a foretaste of artistic pleasure. But when Katya brought the dress that had been asked for, Princess Marya continued to sit motionless before the glass, gazing at her own face, seeing her tear-filled eyes and quivering lips. She was on the verge of breaking into sobs. "Vaya, chère princesse," said Mademoiselle Brun. "Just one more tiny effort." The little princess took the dress from the maid and went to Princess Marya. "Now we'll try something simple and charming," she said. The three voices, hers, Mademoiselle Brun, and that of Katya, who was giggling at something, mingled in a light-hearted babble like the twittering of birds. "No, leave me alone," said Princess Marya. Her voice seemed so serious, so anguished, that the twittering instantly ceased. They looked at the large, beautiful, thoughtful eyes, which were full of tears and clearly imploring gaze at them, and they realized that it was useless and even cruel to insist. "Change your coiffure at least," said the little princess. "I told you," she said reproachfully to Mademoiselle Brun, "that Maya has one of those faces to which such a coiffure is not in the least becoming. But not in the least. Please change it." "Leave me alone. Leave me all alone. All that means nothing to me," answered a tear-choked voice. Mademoiselle Brun and the little princess had to admit to themselves that in this guise Princess Marya looked very homely, worse than usual. But it was too late. She was looking at them with an expression they knew well, an expression of deep thought and sadness. It was not an expression that inspired fear in them. That was a feeling she had never inspired in anyone. But they knew that when it appeared on her face, she became mute and unshakable. "You will change it, won't you?" said Lisa. And when Prince Marya made no reply, she left the room. Princess Marya was left alone. She did not comply with Lisa's request, and not only left her hair as it was, but not even look at herself in the glass. Letting her arms hang helplessly at her side, she sat with downcast eyes and pondered. Her imagination conjured up a husband, a strong, masterful man, a being inconceivably attractive, who suddenly carried her off to a totally different happy world of his own. She pictured a child, her own, like the baby she had seen the day before in the arms of her nurse's daughter. Pictured it at her own breast, and the husband standing by, tenderly gazing at her and the child. But no, cannot be. I am too ugly, she thought. "Please come to tea. The prince is coming directly," said the maid outside her door. She recalled herself with a start, appalled at what she had been thinking. Before going downstairs, she went into the oratory, and fixing her eyes on the dark face of the large icon of the Savior that was lit up by the iconolap, she stood before it with folded hands for several moments. Her soul was tormented by doubt. Could the joy of love, earthly love, for a man be for her? In her thoughts of marriage, Princess Marya dreamed of family happiness and children. But her greatest and most secret dream was of earthly love. The more she tried to hide this longing from others, and even from herself, the stronger it grew. "Oh God," she said, "how am I to self?" The stronger it grew. "How am I to suppress these diabolical thoughts in my heart? How am I to renounce forever these wicked fancies that I may calmly fulfill thy will?" And scarcely had she asked the question when God's answer came to her in her own heart. "Desire nothing for thyself. Seek not. Be not anxious or envious. Man's future and thy own fates must remain hidden from thee. But live so thou mightst be prepared for anything. If it please God to test thee in the duties of marriage, be ready to fulfill his will." With this consoling thought, but still with the hope of fulfilling her earthly dream, Princess Marya sighed, crossed herself, and went downstairs, thinking neither of her dress and coffer, nor of how she would enter the room and talk. What could all that matter in comparison with the will of God, without whose decree not so much as a hair of man's head can fall? Chapter 4. When Princess Marya came down, Prince Vasily and his son were already in the drawing room talking to the little princess and Mademoiselle Brun. As she entered the room with her heavy step, treading on her heels, the gentleman and Mademoiselle Brun stood up, and the little princess, with a gesture in direction, said, "Voilà, Marie." Princess Marya saw them all, and saw them in detail. She saw Prince Vasily's face suddenly grow serious at the sight of her, and instantly smiled again. Saw the little princess studying the faces of the guests with curiosity to see what impression Marie made on them. She saw Mademoiselle Bourienne's ribbon in her pretty face, more animated than ever before, with her gaze fixed on him. But him she could not see. She only saw something large, dazzling, and handsome moving toward her as she entered the room. Prince Vasily approached her first, and she kissed the bald head that bent over her hand, saying in reply to his question that on the contrary she remembered him very well. Then Anatole came up to her. She still could not see him. She only felt a soft hand firmly take her own, then touched with her lips a white forehead above which there was a beautiful light brown hair smelling of pomade. When she glanced at him she was struck by his beauty. Anatole stood with his weight on one leg, the other slightly swaying, his chest thrown out, his back arched, his right thumb under a button of his uniform, and with his head slightly inclined to one side he beamed at the princess without saying anything, apparently not thinking about her at all. Anatole was not a ready conversationalist, not quick-witted or eloquent, but he had the faculty, invaluable in society, of composure and unalterable self-assurance. If a man lacking in self-confidence remains silent on first making someone's acquaintance and betrays his consciousness of the impropriety of this silence and his desire to find something to say, it does not look well. But Anatole remained silent, swing his leg, and smilingly examine the princess's coiffure. It was obvious that he was capable of maintaining this unruffled silence indefinitely. If anyone finds the silence awkward, let him talk, but I don't care to, he seemed to say. Moreover, in his manner toward women, he expressed a supercilious consciousness of his own superiority that more than anything else inspires curiosity, awe, and even love. It was a manner that seemed to say, I know you, I know, but why should I bother about you? You'd be only too delighted, of course. Perhaps he did not actually think this on meeting a woman. It is hardly likely, for in general he thought very little. But his look and manner gave that impression. Princess Marya felt it, and as if wishing to show him that she would not dream of trying to interest him, turned to his father. The conversation was general and animated, thanks to the prattle of the little princess with her downy lip charmingly drawn up over her white teeth. She treated Prince Vasily with the playful manner so often adopted by garrulous, light-hearted people, which consists in the assumption that between the person they are addressing and themselves, there exists some long-established jokes and amusing reminiscences not fully known to others, when in fact no such reminiscences exist, as in the case of the little princess and Prince Vasily. Prince Vasily readily adopted her tone, and the little princess drew Anatole, whom she hardly knew, into these recollections of amusing events that had never occurred. Mademoiselle Bourienne also shared in them, and even Princess Marya felt with pleasure that she was drawn into their gaiety. Here at least we can fully enjoy your company, dear prince, said the little princess, in French, of course, to Prince Vasily. It's not as Annette's receptions where you always ran away. You remember cette chère Annette? Ah, but you won't talk politics to me as you did. And our little tea-table? Oh, yes. Why is it that you were never at Annette's? She asked Anatole. Oh, I know, she added with a little wink. Your brother Hippolyte told me what you were up to. Oh, and she shook her finger at him. I even know about your pranks in Paris. And did Hippolyte tell you, said Prince Vasily, turning to his son and seizing the little princess by the hand as if she were about to run away, and he had just managed to catch her. Did he tell you how he himself was pinning away for our charming little princess, and how she showed him the door? Oh, she's a pearl among women, princess, he added, turning to Princess Marya. At the mention of Paris, Mademoiselle Bourienne did not miss the opportunity to join the general stream of recollections. She took the liberty of asking Anatole if it were long since he had left Paris, and how he liked the city. Anatole very rarely answered the Frenchwoman, and, contemplating her with a smile, talked about her native land. As soon as he saw the pretty little Bourienne, Anatole decided it would not be so dull at Bald Hills after all. Not at all bad, he thought. Scrutinize her. Not at all bad, the little companion. I hope she'll bring her along when we're married. She's a nice little thing. The old prince was unhurriedly dressing in his study, frowning and considering what he was to do. The arrival of these visitors angered him. What are Prince Vasily and that son of his to me? Prince Vasily is a shallow braggart, and his son must be a fine specimen. He grumbled to himself. What angered him was that their coming raised in his mind the unresolved question that he was constantly trying to suppress, the problem concerning which he always deceived himself. The question was whether he could ever bring himself to part with his daughter and relinquish her to a husband. The prince could never face this question, knowing beforehand that he would never answer it justly, and justice would conflict not only his feelings but with the very possibility of his existence. Life without Princess Marya, little as he seemed to value her, was unthinkable to Prince Nikolai Androvich. And why should she marry, he thought, probably to be unhappy. There's Lisa married to Andrei. A better husband would be hard to find nowadays, but is she contented with her lot? And who would marry Marya for love? Plain, awkward. They take her for her connections, for her wealth. And aren't there plenty of women living as spinsters, and better off? So mused Prince Nikolai Androvich while dressing, though the question he kept putting off required an immediate answer. Prince Vasily had brought his son with the obvious intention of making a proposal, and no doubt would want a definite answer today or tomorrow. The name, the social position, were suitable. Well, I have nothing against it, said Prince to himself, but he must be worthy of her. And that is what we shall see. That is what we shall see, he repeated aloud. That is what we shall see. He entered the drawing room with his usual brisk step, taking in the entire company with a swift glance. He noticed a change in the little princess's dress. Mademoiselle Boren's ribbon, Princess Marya's ugly coiffure, the smiles of Anatole and the Frenchwoman, and his daughter's solitude amid the general conversation. Decked out like a fool, he thought, giving her a malevolent look, shameless, and he doesn't even look at her. He went up to Prince Vasily. Well, how do you do? How do you do? Glad to see you. Friendship laughs at a distance, said Vasily in his usual rapid, self-assured, familiar tone. This is my second-born. I beg you to bestow your friendship on him, as we say. Prince Nikolai Androvich scrutinized Anatole. Fine, young man, he said. Well, come and kiss me, and he offered his cheek. Anatole kissed the old man and looked at him with curiosity and perfect composure, expecting any moment to witness a display of the eccentricity his father had predicted it. Prince Nikolai Androvich sat down in his customary place in the corner of the sofa, and drawing up an armchair for Prince Vasily, pointed to it and commenced questioning him about political affairs and other news. He appeared to listen attentively to Prince Vasily, but kept glancing at Princess Marya. So they're writing from Potsdam already, he said, repeating Prince Vasily's last words, and suddenly rising, he went to his daughter. Was it for our visitors that you got yourself up like this, eh? He said. Fine, very fine. You've done up your hair in this new way for visitors, so in the presence of these visitors, I'll tell you in the future, never dare to change your way of dress without my consent. It was my fault, Mon Pierre, the little princess interceded, blushing. You are at liberty to do as you please, said Prince Nikolai Androvich, with an exaggerated bow to his daughter-in-law, but there is no need for her to disfigure herself. She's ugly enough as it is. And he sat down again, taking no further notice of his daughter, whom he had reduced to tears. On the contrary, the coiffure is most becoming to the princess, said Prince Vasily. Now, young man, what is your name? Asked Prince Nikolai Androvich, turning to Anatole. Come here, let's talk and get acquainted. Now the fun begins, thought Anatole, sitting down beside the old prince with a smile. Well now, they tell me you've been educated abroad, not taught to read and write by the sexton, like your father and me. Tell me, my boy, are you serving in the horse guards? Asked the old man, scrutinizing Anatole narrowly and intently. No, I've transferred to the line, said Anatole, hardly able to keep from laughing. Ah, a good thing. So, my boy, you want to serve your country and your Tsar, do you? Wartime, such a fine young fellow ought to serve. So you're off to the front. No, Prince, our regiment has gone, but I'm attached. What is it I'm attached to, Papa? Anatole turned to his father with a laugh. A credit to the service, a credit. Ha, what is it I'm attached to? Ha ha ha, laughed Prince Nikolai Androvich. And Anatole laughed still louder. Suddenly Prince Nikolai Androvich frowned. You may go, he said to Anatole. Anatole returned to the ladies with a smile. So you have had him educated abroad, have you, Prince Vasily, eh? The ill prince turned to Prince Vasily. I have done my best for him, and I can tell you that the education there is far superior to ours. Yes, nowadays everything is different. It's all new. Fine young men, fine young men. Well, come to my study. He took Prince Vasily by the arm and led him to his study. As soon as they were alone together, Prince Vasily disclosed his hopes and wishes. Well, do you think I'm holding on to her? The old prince began irately. That I can't part with her. She can leave tomorrow. Only I'll tell you one thing. I want to know my future son-in-law better. You know my rule. Everything open and above board. I shall ask her tomorrow in your presence. If she's willing, then he can stay on. He can stay a while, and I'll see. The old prince snorted. Let her marry. It's all the same to me, he cried in the same shrill tone in which he had shouted goodbye to his son. I will be frank with you, said Prince Vasily with the air of a cunning man who is convinced of the futility of being crafty with so penetrating an interlocutor. Of course you see right through people. Anatole is no genius, but he is an honest, good-hearted lad and an excellent son and kinsman. Well, all right, we shall see. As always with lonely women who have lived for any length of time without masculine society, when Anatole appeared, all three women of the Prince Nikolai household felt that they had not been really living before. Their powers of thought, feeling, and observation instantly increased tenfold, and it was as if their lives, which till then had been passed into darkness, was suddenly lit up by a new light that was charged with meaning. Princess Marya did not think of her parents, and had quite forgotten about her coiffure. The handsome, open face of the man, who might perhaps become her husband, absorbed her whole attention. It seemed to her that he was kind, brave, and resolute, manly and magnanimous. She was convinced of this. Thousands of dreams of a future married life kept rising in her imagination. She tried to put them out of her mind to suppress them. But I am not too cold with him, Princess Marya wondered. Am I trying to restrain myself because in the depths of my soul I already feel too close to him? But of course he doesn't know all I am thinking of him, and may imagine I don't like him. And Princess Marya made an effort to be cordial to her new guest without quite knowing how. Poor girl, she's devilish ugly, thought Anatole. The thought of Mademoiselle Borin, who had also been raised to a high degree of excitement by Anatole's arrival, were of different order. To be sure, a beautiful young girl without any definite social position, without relation, friends, or even country, did not intend to devote her life to serving Prince Nikolai Andreevich, to reading aloud to him and being a friend to his daughter. Mademoiselle Borin had long been waiting for a Russian prince who, able to appreciate at a glance her superiority to a plain, badly dressed, awkward princess, would fall in love with her and carry her off, and now at last the Russian prince had come. There was a story that Mademoiselle Borin had once heard from her aunt, to which she had given an ending of her own, and which she enjoyed repeating to herself. It was the story of a girl who had been seduced, and to whom her poor mother, sans pouvoir, snapped and reproached her for yielding to a man without marriage. Mademoiselle Borin was often moved to tears as in her imaginations she told them, her seducer, this tale. And now this he, a real Russian prince, had come. He would carry her off, then sans pouvoir would appear and would marry her. So Mademoiselle Borin's future unfolded in her mind as she talked to Anatole about Paris. It was not calculation that guided her. She did not for a moment consider what she'd do. All this had long been ready within her, and now that Anatole had appeared, it simply arranged itself around him, and she made every effort to be attractive as possible to him. The little princess, like an old warhorse hearing a bugle note, unconsciously and quite forgetting her condition, was ready to fall into the old familiar canter of coquetry, without resistance or ulterior motive, but with the naive and frivolous gaiety. Although in feminine society, Anatole generally assumed the attitude of a man who was tired of being run after by women, it gratified his vanity to see the effect he had on these three women. Besides, he was beginning to feel for the pretty and provocative Mademoiselle Borin that passionate animal feeling that was apt to come over him with great suddenness, prompting him to the coarsest and most reckless acts. After tea, the company moved into the sitting room, and Princess Marya was asked to play on the clavichord. Anatole came and stood beside Mademoiselle Borin, and leaning on his elbows, fixed his gaze, full of laughter and delight, on Princess Marya. The princess felt his look with a joyous, painful emotion. She was borne by her favorite sonata in a poetic world of Rome, which the look she felt upon her made still more poetic. But through his eyes were on her, the expression related not to her, but to the movements of Mademoiselle Bourienne's little foot, which he was touching with his own little foot under the clavichord. Mademoiselle Bourienne was also gazing at Princess Marya. In her eyes there was an apprehensive look of hope and joy that was new to the princess. How she loves me, thought Princess Marya. How happy I am now, and how happy I may be with such a friend and such a husband. Husband, is it really possible? She wondered, not daring to look at his face, but feeling his gaze fixed on her. In the evening, after supper, when they were about to retire, Anatole kissed Princess Marya's hand. Wondering at her own courage, she looked straight into his handsome face as it came close to her own nearsighted eyes, and then went up to Mademoiselle Bourienne and kissed her hand. This was a breach of etiquette, but he did everything with such simplicity and assurance. Mademoiselle Bourienne blushed and glanced at Princess Marya in dismay. What delicacy, thought Princess Marya. Is it possible that Amélie, Mademoiselle Bourienne, thinks I could be jealous of her and not appreciate her pure affection and devotion to me? She went up to her and kissed her warmly. Anatole went to the little princess. No, no, no. When your father writes and tells me you are behaving yourself, then I will give you my hand to kiss. And not before, she said. And smiling, raising a finger at him, she left the room. And I'm going to leave it off there. If you like what you're seeing or read, if you like what I'm reading, just give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs down. Leave a comment below and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video.